Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. So, we got a really interesting batch of articles from you all about Gen Z and like their impact on work. And you know what? This is way more than just like TikTok or whatever, avocado toast, right? Like their values are seriously starting to like reshape how companies do things. Everything from like, flexible work to like, ethical leadership and stuff.
Yeah.
It's going to be super interesting to see how this all like plays out in your workplace. So
Yeah, absolutely.
let's dive into this. Let's get right into it.
Let's do it.
Gen Z, maximizing communication and influence at work, or, well, actually, that's the English translation. The original title was in Korean.
Ah, okay.
Gen Z, 가천에 하자.
Wow, okay.
So,
It's a really fascinating study.
Mhm.
Gets to like the core of what makes this generation tick,
yeah.
They're not just like adapting to the working world. They're like straight up changing it.
Uh-huh.
It's really cool to see.
All right, so let's paint a picture of Gen Z, right? What do we know about them? The source kind of highlights some key characteristics, and first off, they're like the most racially and ethnically diverse generation, like in U.S. history.
Yeah.
They're super progressive, concerned with, social justice, equality, climate change, all the.
And this isn't just like talk for them,
All right.
They're actually like engaged in activism and advocacy. They really want to see change. Like, really.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
The source points out this kind of like interesting contradiction and like what I'm calling the pragmatic paradox, right?
Right.
They're deeply pragmatic, like shaped by economic uncertainty, but they're also idealistic and driven by purpose. It's almost like they want to change the world, but like also make sure they can pay rent.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that paradox really comes to life when you look at how they approach their careers. Like, you think about it, they came of age during like the rise of the gig economy, watching companies lay off tons of employees, while like preaching about disruption and innovation at the same time. And they saw, their parents struggle through recessions, maybe even, lose their homes. So it makes sense that they crave stability and meaning in their work at the same time.
So how does that play out like in their career choices? Are they more likely to like freelance, start their own businesses? I mean, what are we seeing?
I mean, they're definitely more entrepreneurial than like, previous generations. And they're not afraid to just like quit a job if it's not fulfilling their needs.
Right.
Like practically and personally. And this means they might be drawn to companies with like strong social responsibility initiatives or to roles that offer like flexibility and work-life balance.
So it's like they're almost like forcing these companies to take a hard look at their values and like how they do things.
Oh, absolutely. And companies that don't adapt to this, they're going to miss out on some of the brightest and most talented people like, entering the workforce.
Right.
It's a huge shift.
Okay, so we've got a pretty good grasp on who Gen Z is, but like, why should like these established businesses even care? Like, what's the big deal? Some folks might think, oh, they'll learn. They'll adapt to the real world eventually.
Yeah.
Is that the case?
I think that's a like pretty dangerous assumption, honestly.
Yeah.
By 2025, Gen Z is going to make up like a third, of all workers.
Yeah.
Ignoring them is not an option.
Yeah, and the source makes a good point. It's not just about numbers, right?
Yeah.
It's the skills. They bring a unique set of skills. They're like digital natives. They're so comfortable with technology in a way that like previous generations just aren't.
Like they grew up with smartphones, social media, constant connection. They don't just use technology, they live it,
Right.
It's part of who they are.
And that tech fluency, that's going to be huge.
Oh, yeah.
In like an increasingly digital world.
Absolutely. And they're also just like so entrepreneurial too.
Right.
Even if they're not like, starting their own businesses, they want to create things, innovate. They want to like learn and grow all the time.
Yeah.
They're not content to just like, clock in and clock out.
Right. Yeah.
It's a different mindset.
So have you seen this firsthand, like this drive for meaning and purpose, like in your own interactions with Gen Z?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I've mentored a few Gen Zers and like, I've worked with a lot of them, and it's clear that they're not just looking for a paycheck. Like they want to know that their work matters.
Yeah.
That they're making a difference, and they're not afraid to ask the tough questions like, what is this company's impact on the world?
Yeah.
What are you doing to address climate change? How are you supporting diversity and inclusion?
Right.
And, it can be a little intimidating at first, but it's also really refreshing.
Yeah.
It's like they're holding us accountable.
It's like they're pushing us to be better.
Exactly. And I think we need that.
Yeah, I think so too. So it sounds like Gen Z is really raising the bar for all of us when it comes to like expectations at work. But what does a Gen Z friendly workplace actually look like? Like what do they actually want from their employers?
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, what do they want?
Well, the source actually outlines a few like key things.
Okay.
One that really stands out is this desire for like ethical leadership and like values-driven work.
Yeah.
They want their jobs to like align with their values, and they're not afraid to walk away if they feel like their employer is being like, hypocritical or whatever.
It makes you wonder if it's like it goes beyond Gen Z, maybe it's just a sign of like a broader like societal shift or something.
Yeah.
Where like people across like all generations are wanting more purpose from their work.
I think you're right, but Gen Z is definitely like at the forefront of this whole movement. Like you look at the rise of like B corporations, these companies that are like legally required to consider the impact of their decisions, on their workers, their customers, even the environment.
Yeah.
And we're seeing more and more Gen Z professionals like gravitate towards these types of companies.
Yeah.
Which is like forcing traditional businesses to kind of rethink how they do things.
So it sounds like they're not just asking for like superficial changes. They're demanding a like complete overhaul,
Totally. And this extends to their expectations around mentorship and like interpersonal connection.
Okay.
They're not just looking for a boss, you know what I mean?
Right.
They want guidance, they want support.
Right.
From people with experience.
This makes me think of companies like Google, Yeah. They have these like reverse mentorship programs where senior leaders are paired with like junior employees.
Oh, that's interesting.
From different backgrounds and departments. Yeah. And it's a way for like both of them to learn from each other.
I love that.
Yeah, and it's like breaking down these like traditional hierarchy.
That's a great example. It really speaks to Gen Z's desire for a more like collaborative and inclusive, work environment.
Speaking of which, the source mentions like flexible work arrangements.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
As like non-negotiable for Gen Z.
Huge. Right.
They want like hybrid models, remote options. They want that work-life balance.
It makes perfect sense considering they've like grown up watching their parents struggle with like long commutes and like inflexible work schedules.
Right.
And they've seen how technology can like enable remote work.
Makes me think of companies like Automatic.
Yeah.
The company behind WordPress.
Yeah.
They've been like fully remote since like the beginning.
Wow.
And they've like built this thriving global workforce just by like embracing asynchronous communication and flexible schedules.
That's amazing.
And they're not alone, right?
No, definitely not.
There's like Zapier, GitLab, Envision, all these companies that are like pioneering the remote workspace.
And it's not just tech companies either.
Right.
We're seeing this like everywhere.
It feels like remote work is here to stay.
Yeah.
Right.
It really does.
And it's not just about convenience. It's about like empowering employees, to work in a way that like suits them, you know, their needs and their lifestyles.
Totally. And that ties into another key expectation of Gen Z, inclusivity and accessibility.
Right.
They want companies to go beyond just like, surface level diversity initiatives.
Yeah.
They want them to address the underlying biases and just like ensure that everyone feels like they belong,
Makes me think about like mental health in the workplace.
Oh, absolutely.
That's something that's been like so stigmatized for so long.
Yeah.
But Gen Z is much more open about it.
Yeah.
They're more willing to like talk about it.
Yeah.
And seek support,
And companies are starting to take notice, which is good. We're seeing more and more companies like implement mental health programs, benefits, offering things like, on-site counseling or meditation apps, or even just like, flexible work arrangements to accommodate therapy appointments.
Yeah, it's really encouraging to see that shift, Yeah. It seems like companies are finally starting to recognize that like mental health is just as important as physical health.
Yeah, for sure.
And like, supporting employees' well-being is essential.
Absolutely.
If you want to create a truly inclusive and productive workplace.
Yeah, and it's not just mental health. Gen Z expects companies to be inclusive of like all backgrounds, all abilities, all neurodiversity.
Okay.
Like they want to see representation at all levels of the company,
And this is where those actionable steps come in, right?
Yeah.
For creating a Gen Z friendly workplace.
Right.
The ones that are outlined in the source material.
Yeah, yeah. They're actually quite insightful.
Yeah.
The first one is like, embrace vulnerability and the power of connection, which is really about like moving away from that like traditional hierarchical model of communication, you know, and fostering a culture of like openness and authenticity.
So instead of like, the dreaded annual performance review,
Yeah.
you're having like regular check-ins, where feedback is given and received in a way that's constructive.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about like, creating a safe space where employees feel comfortable sharing their ideas, their concerns, even their mistakes without like fear of judgment.
And that benefits everybody.
Right.
When people feel like they can be themselves at work, they're more engaged, they're more productive, they're more likely to stick around.
Yeah. The second step is bring humanity to work, which is basically like, recognizing that your employees are whole people.
Right.
Right. With lives and responsibilities outside of work.
And those lives like inevitably impact their work.
Totally.
Whether we acknowledge it or not. Yeah.
The companies that can like adapt and embrace that are going to be more successful in attracting and retaining people.
100%, yeah. This could look like, flexible work policies to accommodate personal appointments or, offering on-site childcare or, generous parental leave benefits. Okay,
and the source's third step is offer established career trajectories.
Yeah.
Which seems, it seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's about providing like clear paths for growth and advancement within the company.
It's super important, especially for a generation like Gen Z that's, ambitious and eager to learn and grow. Transparency is key here, like clear salary bands, regular performance reviews with like opportunities for promotion, mentorship programs, anything that shows employees how they can like, progress within the company.
And the final step, which we've kind of already touched on a bit, is like create an inclusive environment. But as we've discussed, it needs to be more than just like, surface level. Right, exactly. It's not enough to just like, have a diversity statement on your website or whatever.
Right.
It needs to be baked into the company culture,
Right.
From hiring practices to promotion decisions to just like how people interact with each other on a daily basis.
So how can companies actually like do this?
Yeah. The source suggests things like, employee belonging committees, diversity training, inclusive language guidelines.
Okay, yeah.
Those are all like good starting points.
Yeah.
But it's also about making sure that like everyone feels like their voice is heard.
Right.
Like their contributions are valued,
So to recap, the 4 steps for creating a Gen Z-friendly workplace are to embrace vulnerability and connection, bring humanity to work, offer established career trajectories, and create an inclusive environment.
Right. And remember, these aren't just boxes to tick,
Yeah.
Gen Z can spot inauthenticity like a mile away.
Right.
So these changes need to be genuine.
Right.
Heartfelt.
Yeah.
If they're going to have like a real impact.
It's fascinating to think that those 4 steps could actually like benefit employees of any generation, really.
Right.
So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Like, do you see those changes happening in your own workplace?
Yeah, I think to some extent, yes. But I think there's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of companies are still kind of stuck in that like old way of thinking,
Yeah.
Like this is how we've always done it, so why change?
Right.
But I think, as more and more Gen Zers enter the workforce, companies are going to have to adapt.
Right.
Or they're going to be left behind.
It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how it all like shakes out. What do you think are some of the like biggest challenges for companies trying to adapt to all of this?
I think honestly, like one of the biggest challenges is going to be overcoming resistance from more traditional leaders.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The ones who might see these changes as like unnecessary,
Yeah.
or even like counterproductive or something.
Right.
There's this perception out there that Gen Z is like entitled,
Right.
or demanding,
Yeah.
But I think what they're really asking for is a workplace that's just like more aligned with their values,
Right.
and with their priorities.
It's almost like they're challenging us to rethink what work should even look like.
Totally.
I
think honestly that's a good thing.
Yeah.
We've been operating under the same like assumptions about work for like decades.
Yeah.
It's time for like, a refresh.
Yeah. So how do we bridge that gap? You know, how do we convince those traditional leaders that these changes are not just like, beneficial for the Gen Z employees, but for like literally everyone?
Right, right. I think it's about highlighting the business case, Like there are studies that show that companies with strong diversity and inclusion initiatives are more innovative.
Right.
They're more profitable.
Yeah.
Companies that offer flexible work arrangements have lower turnover, higher employee engagement. Like it's all connected.
So it's about like reframing the conversation.
Right. Yeah.
Focusing on the
I mean,
positive.
showcasing successful examples.
Yeah.
Companies that have actually done this.
Right.
And are seeing the benefits.
This whole deep dive has really like been eye-opening, I think, just to see how Gen Z's values and expectations are literally like shaping the future of work. I mean, what would you say is like the most important takeaway from all of this? What do you want our listeners to like really remember?
Okay. I think the key takeaway here is that embracing Gen Z's expectations, it isn't just about like, attracting young talent or even just retaining them. It's bigger than that. It's about creating a better workplace for literally everyone.
Right.
Like a workplace that prioritizes open communication, work-life balance, mental health, inclusivity.
Yeah.
All of that benefits everybody.
It's about building a future of work that we can all like actually be proud of.
Exactly.
So that wraps up our deep dive into Gen Z and the future of work. We've talked about their like unique characteristics, their impact, the steps companies can take to adapt and thrive. And I really hope this has given you all some food for thought.
Yeah.
And maybe even some inspiration for how you can like apply these insights to your own work life. So whether you're, like leading a team, seeking a new job, or just trying to understand how things are changing. Knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.